Okay, good morning. I want to talk about a little bit of a confusing shtickle in the Mat Ephraim. It's in the Taf Kuf Pei Daled about Aliyas and Hashanah. I just want to start with two slightly humorous stories. I can't vouch for the authenticity of either of them. It's possible none of them happened, but they're both cute. Back in the day, there was something called a millionaire's shul. Today, we have it only unofficially. They don't officially have it. Back then, there were shuls that were named, like every shul was from a certain group of business people, and there was a millionaire shul. There was a few of them. I actually saw the Netziv's son, Professor Meir Berlin, writing about a millionaire shul. He describes it. He says it's a shul where every person there is either a millionaire or behaves like he's a millionaire. So he's just interesting. So there was a millionaire shul in Russia, in St. Petersburg, Aim Habira, with the seat of government, and all the oligarchs of the Russian, populace were sitting there for Ne'ilah, and there was many Jewish oligarchs. A lot of them weren't religious at all, some were. And they were sitting there, it was Yom Kippur, and Far Ne'ilah, the Gabbai got up, and he's making a bidding war for Psicha for Ne'ilah. And everybody's bidding, Ahi and Aher, and totally fry, irreligious barons are bidding. And someone goes over to, Baron, Valinsky, and asks him, why are you bidding? You're not even religious. You don't care about this at all. What does this mean to you? He says, you don't understand. Baron Ginsburg over there, who was religious, Baron Ginsburg is a famous Teirish that's a Baron Ginsburg. He has a great eye. He's a very, very good businessman. If he's bidding for something, I want it. So and the bidding war continues. Now, that's one anecdote. A second story, again, that I can't vouch for, is Rav Hutner. We know, everybody knows that in the Nusach Ashkenaz Welt, called the Yeshivish world, the best aliyah to get is the third aliyah. Shlishi is the best aliyah. By the Chassidish Welt, by the Mekubalim, by the Svardim, it's Shishi instead of Shlishi. They say over a story of Hutner when he lived in Eretz Yisrael, when he when he moved to Eretz Yisrael towards the end of his life. So he lived, I think, in Beit Vegan, and his yeshiva, Pachad Yitzchak, was not so close by. And one Shabbos it was pouring, and he couldn't make it to yeshiva. And he went to the closest shul to where he lived, to a little shtibel, like a Chassidish shtibel, a little rebbe, some small rebbe, and Hutner was there. And by Kriyas HaTorah, the Gabbai, by Shlishi, starts calling up. He goes over to him, starts asking him his name. And Rav Hutner tells him, no, Davil Shishi. In Yeshiva, Nemech Shlishi, Davil Shishi. It's not a kibbutz to give me Shlishi over here. Over here, it's a Shvach Aliyah. Now, again, I don't know if the story happened, it didn't happen, but the point is it highlights the desirability factor of specific aliyahs versus other aliyahs, the money that people are willing to pay, the system of turning it into like a financial system in shul, and etc. Now, the Welt says over, and I don't know if this is true, but that one of the reasons why Chassidim wanted shtiblach instead of shuls, early Chassidim, was because in the shtetl, the aliyah system reinforced the social hierarchy. So a Talmud Chacham and an Askin and an important person got aliyahs, and people who were not important, Amaratzim, got nothing. And in the shtibel, it was more even. It went around, everybody got. I don't know if it's true, it's not true. In any case, this is just the idea. So now, there's a Mat Ephraim that says something interesting. And then we'll break this down piece by piece. Mat Ephraim says like this. He says, Afbim kaimis shenayigim limkar mitzvahs, even in the places where the minig is to sell the mitzvahs, meaning to sell the aliyahs, hainu haitzah sefer Torah v'aliyahs v'hagba v'glila, where they sell all these things, mikol makayim, Rosh Hashanah v'yem kippur meherayu shalei limachar. On Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and this is not at all our minig, everybody knows this, but on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, the minig is, he says, it's roi min haroyu shalei limkar, they shouldn't be sold. Why? Shalapa'amim malin bedamim, it just gets very high in price. V'koinin ha-mitzvahs b'nei adam she'enim mehuganim kol kach. And it ends up being that people who don't deserve the aliyahs, who don't deserve the kibudim, are buying the kibudim. And even if they're not mamash shlachta people, there are people who deserve it more than them. So you shouldn't sell it on Rosh Hashanah. Even though during the whole year we're makel about this and we let the wrong seder of aliyahs go and people who don't deserve them get them because we want to make money for the shul, during these heilig attack, it's better to be marbek kvayt shemayim and only give aliyahs people who deserve them. This is what the Mat Ephraim says. Now, the Rosh Hashanah in his inimitable fashion writes, Achshav bizmanenu, that we need the money too badly. This is not even something to be concerned with. The Rosh Hashanah writes that he says, Achshav, that we need the money, just disregard this thing and continue selling them. Now the Mat Ephraim continues and he says, even in places where they do sell it, a person should try very hard to buy it with money. It's better to buy a mitzvah than to get a mitzvah for free. This is what the Mat Ephraim says. The Mat Ephraim says two sides of the coin. He says, first of all, If there's a bidding war, participate in the bidding war. I want you to try to buy aliyas. It's the right thing to try to buy aliyas. It's a mila to buy aliyas on these Yom Niran. But he says, during Yom Niran, we really shouldn't have aliyah selling because it's going to the wrong people. So I wanted to just chart a little bit the whole hishtalshlus of how aliyahs were, how they became a commodity that's something was buying and selling, and maybe the tzaddim to yes or no sell them in Rosh Hashanah. I do want to be mekatzer today because it's late, so we'll see what we could squeeze in. So as follows. If you look in the Gemara in Gittin, Daf Nun Tes, there's a Mishnah that says the Seder for aliyahs that we do. We call the Kayin first, Levi second, the Yisrael third, and the Mishnah says we do that to keep the peace. Now the Gemara right away brings two or three different reasons two or three different drushes why we give Kayin first. One of them is a famous one, Vikidashtoi, that we give a Kayin the first aliyah. The other is a different pasuk. But Yich Shiyad Gemara brings Makairis, proper Makairis, that the Kayin should get the aliyah first. So why Mipnei Darkei Hashalom? So Darkei Hashalom is that even if a Kayin who's less of a Talmud Chacham than the person who's pushing out of the way, and he wants to be Mevater to him, meaning the Kayin doesn't want aliyah, there's a big Adam Gadol in the audience who's Yisrael, and the Kayin says, please, Achil Nish the aliyah, give it to Yana. So the din is, Medina the Gemara and the din of the Mishnah really, the Mishnah says, Mipnei Darkei Hashalom, we don't allow that. We don't allow the Kayin to be Mevater to someone who's his level or low. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. His level or lower than him. Someone much greater than him, the Kain's allowed to be Mevater to him. That we pass like that in Shulchan Aruch. But someone who's his level or lower, we don't allow the Kain to be Mevater to Darkei Hashalom. Why? So the Rishonim explain. Because everybody thinks that he's a little bit better than the Kain. There's almost no one in the audience who doesn't think I'm a little better in learning than the Kain. I'm a bishtikal more about stucker than the Kain. Everyone thinks he's a little better than the Kain. So if you're going to let the Kain start making hasharis, okay, Yene Pashadiyah is a little better than me, but this guy's not a little better than me, it's going to lead to fights. So in Predakei Hashalom, Chazal said, there's no Kayin can't be Mevater unless he's being Mevater to a real Gadol, someone who's by far and away bigger than him. This is Medina the Gemara. So the Gemara, then the Gemara continues, the Gemara says, okay, what happens with the rest of the aliyahs? And the Gemara says, the rest of the aliyahs you give to Talmidei Chachamim, then Parnasim Amumunum al Kahal, the children of Parnasim Amumunum al Kahal, then people who are just, low-level Mamunim on the Kahal, and it gives a whole set of structure, whole order. Rather, they say over that the Gain used to get Shishi, not Shlishi. The Gain in his clothes would get Shishi, not Shlishi. And there's a Psanidin amongst the Talmidim why the Gain wanted Dafka Shishi. Some say because the Gain was a Shtikal Mekobel and Alpi Kabbalah, Alpi the Zayar, Shishi's the better Aliyah to get, which is why Chsidim and Svardim, Shishi's the Kibbud. Others say, and it's a strange thing to say, Rav Naftali Heretz, the Mechaber of the Siddur Agra, he writes that the Gain he looked through the order, and he said, Ken Kayin ben Achnish, Ken Levi ben Achnish, Talmud Chacham ben Achnish, Parnas Atzibra I'm not a Rav. Children of Parnas Atzibra I'm also not, because my father was not Rav of Vilna or anything. So the sixth thing, like a minor Pirchei leader, Das bin I could get Shishi. This is what Naftali Heretz writes in the Siddur. To me it's a strange thing, but this is what he writes, that the guy would only get Shishi because he held he wasn't Rav for anything that came on the list before it. In any case, there was a very strong kilo hierarchy to the aliyahs that they had. And as I is Paskin in Shulchan Aruch really, if you look in Shulchan Aruch, it's in Mekuf Lamed Vav and Arachayim, the Shulchan Aruch Paskins, this is how we distribute aliyahs. Aliyahs should be given out in this hierarchy. Now, a long time ago, maybe 800-900 years ago, in the Ashkenazi world first, and then following the Sfardim, they became a minhag to sell aliyahs, to sell mitzvahs. Now, it's interesting that they didn't originally sell aliyahs. What the original things that they would sell, if you look in the minhagim, the early minhagim Sfardim, like the minhagim Beis Maram and the Rav Kleisner and Yosef Yazpa and whatever, all the different early Ashkenazi minhagim Sfardim, you see what they sold was these very interesting shtellas. They had a shteller called, I forgot the name of it. They had interesting names for the shtellas. They had a shteller called they had a shteller called Shehiyah, which meant if whoever was getting the aliyah wasn't in shul, this guy goes up, like a standby, like a DH. Shehiyah was called, he's on deck. He's always waiting. In case there's an open aliyah, he gets it. Then they had someone who, they sold another kibbutz called Kol V'Kol. That means if the guy who bought this Shabbos' aliyahs and the backup guy wasn't there, then he's mamish cleanup, he gets Kol V'Kol. And then they had a guy who they sold, there was no Bakol Mikol Kol, they had a scan, they had a misher, meaning it's interesting, they had a kibbutz that was called taking out the Sefer Torah during Psukkah the Zimra, going to the bima and mishing it to the right place, making sure it's in the right place. That was a kibbutz. Now, as I told someone yesterday, he told me, I would still pay to skip Psukkah the Zimra. So I don't know. They had a kibbutz of mishing it on the bima. It was like interesting kibbutz. There was a kibbutz to put on and take off the pareichas, to do psicha. They didn't have dafka selling every mitzvah, the earliest minhag, but over time these minhagim call it like morphed into what we are familiar with today, a minhagim of selling specific aliyahs, and everything. Now, afterwards, layered on top of that is all the different various schools for certain aliyahs, what some aliyahs are more valuable than others, which some are more musbach than others, some are real, some are not real. But the oldest minhag that they used to do was on Simchas Torah to sell all the kibbudim for the whole year. That was the minig. Now, later on, it got too hectic in some Chastera. They had long hakafas, so they would push it off to Shabbos Bereshis. In Chabad, I think still the minig is Shabbos Bereshis, they sell the kibbudim for the whole year. That's the minig. That was the oldest Ashkenazi minig was to sell like that. Now, what was the reason for this? What's the mile of selling mitzvahs? So A is a simple, the shuls needed money. It's if you commoditize, the kibbud that's in shul, for better or for worse, you're going to be able to make money from it, and that's a good way. You take things that have some sort of covet attached to it, you're going to be able to make money off the kibbud. That's simple. That's the Pashat Pshat, and you see definitely in a lot of Svarim, they're writing that. The money goes to the Yisayimim, to the Shul, to the Eitzim, to the whatever it is. Even the Chavetz Chaim and Avos Chesed, he writes it even. So the money's going to good things, and that's why it's being sold. Now, another reason is Mishum Chiv of Mitzvah. It makes like a certain Chavivas for the Mitzvah if you pay for it. And that is Al Pi the Zayir, the Yisayim the Sherish Havayda actually brings it down in Hilchos Rosh Hashanah, that Al Pi the Zayir, any Mitzvah that you pay for and you give money towards it, advises a certain Chashivas, a certain Chavivas, and that's a big Maila for Mitzvahs. To show that Chashivas for Mitzvahs, that's what we're looking to do. Another interesting reason that's brought down in the Rishonim, and the Maril brings this down, is the din of B'rei V'Amhadras Melech. Meaning we know that, let's say, by Purim, we lay in with a big tzibur, right? By mitzvahs, we try to do mitzvahs with a big tzibur. Now, generally, the mitzvah of B'rei V'Amhadras Melech means to involve as many participants as possible. It doesn't mean to observe a mitzvah. It means a mitzvah that's done with as many participants as possible is a maila. So the some Rishonim explain that B'rei V'Amhadras Melech over here is Hayos Ta'aliyas Be'atzem. Only 7 people get to participate in it. It's really small, right? You could have a shul 100 people in it. A small amount of people get to participate in it. But if you make a bidding war, and now you have 45 people participating in the aliyas, so that's a bechin of B'rei V'Amhadras Melech. Everybody got his hand in the pot over here and tried to participate a little bit. So if you make a big thing, the shul settles down, and somebody comes and they raffle it off and thing, that's a form of B'rei V'Amhadras Melech. These are the various different reasons that are given throughout the minhagim svarim, the Rishonim that discuss it. Now, another very primary reason, and this one's brought down in the Maram Mimintz in 2 different places, is that the reason for selling aliyas was to avoid fighting. If aliyas were given on the free market, so either you have a gabbai who's just in charge and gives his friends and doesn't give certain people, or you have powerful people who come up and they say, Herzchayin, I want X, Y, and Z. And what ends up happening is that the simple people, they fall through the cracks. Some of them are unhappy. You can have 2 people who are of equal stature or fighting with each other. So in order to avoid fighting, you purchase it. You purchase it, it's yours. You don't purchase it, it's not yours. As a way to avoid fighting. Now, these are the various different reasons that these minhagim. This minig became very, very prevalent. For some reason, in like the, mid-1800s called, the minig went away. And now the only time we sell aliyahs are like literally Yom Tovim. We sell probably Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuos, right? We don't sell aliyahs on a regular basis. Sometimes you go to a shtibel, they'll sell, mitzvahs, but we don't really do it. For whatever reason, it went away. Probably, if you look at the various shuvas that discuss it, it was leading to more fights. As I guess income inequality became a thing, and there were some very rich people and some poor people, it became weiter. People would be upset. What, just because the guy has more money than me, he gets all the kibbudim? So that itself became like a reason for fighting, and they kind of did away with the minig. So now to come to Rosh Hashanah. So Rosh Hashanah, let's go through some of these reasons. All the reasons of B'rei V'Amhadras Melech and chiv of mitzvah and to avoid fighting, they seem to be all very much in place. When Yom Niram come around, you want to sell the aliyahs, everything should be organized and streamlined. They shouldn't be fighting. They shouldn't be any problematic. So now what's the issue? Why does the Mat Ephraim say not to do this? Mat Ephraim says one reason. Mat Ephraim says because it leads to Anashim She'enim Huganim getting the aliyahs. And even though that's really a problem from all year long, but on Rosh Hashanah when it's Yom HaKadosh, it's Heilig Yom Tov, we want to be makpid that people who aren't supposed to get aliyahs don't get aliyahs. That's what Mat Ephraim says. Now I saw in others, there's a few tshuvas about this, where they write as follows, that Lamaisa, selling aliyahs brings somewhat of a carnival atmosphere to shul. Right? The Chidah in a tshuva where he writes that the Ilm should be very makpid, he says not to talk during Mechiras aliyahs. If you can, you should say Tehillim or learn. He's talking about people who are not in the bidding, obviously, who are not involved in the bidding. Don't just shmooze around. But if anyone's been to a shul, that's not really how it works by Mechiras, by selling aliyahs. Aliyahs brings, selling b'chlal, it brings some sort of carnival atmosphere to the shul. And on Rosh Hashanah, where there's supposed to be an Amos Hadin, and we daven in a certain way, a very particular way, a way with much more reverence and derech eretz than the rest of the year. And there's even some dinim in Shulchan Aruch because of this, right? We don't say Hallel because of Amos Hadin. And there's a few different dinim. The Taz has a different din. We're makbid on Amos Hadin. So say some poskim, it doesn't make sense to bring that carnival atmosphere into shul on Rosh Hashanah. You should be very cautious. And if you look taka in the Mat Ephraim, in the Elef Mata on the bottom of here, the Mat Ephraim says V'royel adam l'shtad l'iknes aliyah kodim Rosh Hashanah. He's talking about some sort of system where you don't do selling on Rosh Hashanah itself. Try to buy an aliyah before Rosh Hashanah, which means they would probably do it the Shabbos before. I saw in some places they would get together the Thursday night before. they'd make a mechiras aliyas, mechiras mitzvahs, meaning some sort of minik to buy it before so that it doesn't lead to the carnival atmosphere in Rosh Hashanah. Now, Mitzat Sheni, there's an interesting Gemara that I saw, zugestellt, is as follows. There's a Gemara in Sukkah, on Daf Malv, that says as follows: Ma'aseh Reb Gamliel, Reb Yishuv, Reb Eliezer ben Azariah, Reb Akiva, sheibayim b'sfina. They were traveling on a boat together. It's a famous Gemara. The Gemara says these 4 Tanoim were traveling on a boat together. V'lo haya lulav, there was no lulav until Reb Gamliel bought one for 11 zuz. And the Gemara explains that why are we telling over the story? The Gemara is Masber. We're saying 11 zuz to be madgish lahidiach hakama mitzvahs chavivas aleim, to show how the mitzvahs are chaviv aleim. Now it's very interesting. The Aruch LaNer over there asks. He says, how does it show mitzvahs chavivas aleim? Maybe the price was 1,000 zuz. That's what it costed. Reb Gamliel was the only one who had the money. He bought it. No one else had the money. They didn't buy it. Where do you see mitzvahs chavivas aleim? You don't see anything. You just see that Reb Gamliel was able to. He had the money on him. He bought the mitzvahs. So says the Aruch LaNer, says Mistama, what the Gemara is telling you is that they had a bidding war. There was one lulav available for everybody, and they bid for it. And he says, if you notice, lashon is laharish mitzvahs chavivas aleihem, on them, on the whole group. All these 4 Tanaim who were sitting on the boat were trying to bid who could get the mitzvah first. So Gamliel was grabbed the richest. He was the nasi. He had the most money. He had the deepest pockets. So Gamliel outbid them, and he got it for 11 zuz, which was an exorbitant amount of money. It shouldn't have cost that much. It was just a very small market, and supply and demand. They bid it up against each other, and it turned into that. So I saw from Ritzk Zilberstein in his tshuva on this topic. He writes that you see that the idea of bidding up the aliyahs exorbitantly and making it, so to speak, creating that carnival atmosphere a little bit, where das alain, that's something that isn't worth it, and everyone's looking like who paid and who gave and how much did he pay for this and for that. Like das alain gives a certain chshivas to these mitzvahs, to these aliyahs, to whatever's being sold upon, and therefore he says, provided you could strike that like fine balance between overdoing it to the point of silliness and fighting and whatever, it's kedai, he says, based on this chazal and based on this Aruch LaNer, to do this in the shul, to create this environment of cover. Then obviously he brings the chidah that a person should be careful not to talk and make noise stam during the time. But I guess pok chaziyam with the bar. In any case, to be continued.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.